Well, hello. Welcome to a one-off, and this is a trip up to the English Lake District, and the lake Windermere is the one that we'll be at. And it's actually winter when we went up there, so are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. It's called Wild Birds by Windermere. Our yearning for the English Lake District urged us into the car this Sunday morning, and in an hour and a half we were deep in the country lanes that took us through the rolling and rocky foothills to Lake Windermere. Every winter we go to this little-known path by the shore at Red Nab, far away from the busy side of the lake. This is a quiet, atmospheric wood, and the lapping lake waters are only a few feet from the path. There is no traffic noise, and only the sound of birds and water on this side of the lake. Waves occasionally roll in, sometime after a pleasure boat has motored down the centre of the lake. The boats seem almost silent in the muffled, wintry air, even though you can see the waves they make and the churning foam at the back of them. Two black crows rested on a leafless, black-barked tree on the lake's edge. Behind them rose the mountains in grey relief with snowy peaks beyond the far shore. Just below the peaks, a line of white mist hung along almost the whole length of the water and reflected on by the light grey of the sky. Quite suddenly, a hawk flew past, low, across the water, too fast for us to identify which kind of hawk it was, and soon completely out of sight, but thrilling nevertheless. After putting on our boots, we sat down to eat our packed lunch with a steaming cup of tea from the flask that has served us so well on many winter walks. Soon we could hear a high-pitched see, see, high in the silver birch trees with their vein-like bare branches stretching 20 feet high. I looked upwards and saw a bird with a tiny body and long tail flitting with great speed and agility. It was a long-tailed tit, and was quickly joined by a flock of energetic comrades. For those long-tailed tits, they always travel in a gang. 3 or 4 feet from the ground, and not far from us, was a hungry robin, standing in a hollow in the tree. Its feathers were fluffed out so that it comically resembled a red and brown ball with a beak and tail. 2 or 3 seagulls wheeled low and close over the water with lonesome cries to complete the scene. We set off along the shore to walk the couple of miles or so and back. We usually come here each December to clip a few sprigs of the plentiful holly along here to take to decorate our front door for Christmas. This year we had missed that ritual, and so we were here in January instead. The holly bushes were all devoid of shiny red berries now, and Paul wondered if they had all been eaten by birds or taken by walkers. There were certainly plenty of birds in the wood and in the trees and bushes by the water. and we soon alighted upon a sudden movement in low branches close to the water. We thought at first it was a little wren, as it fluttered from branch to branch, but its tail was not characteristically vertical. It was such a very small bird. It must be something special. We stood stock still, hoping it would not notice us and so come closer. This worked. It came closer, and we could see a yellow stripe on the little brown head. This was a tiny goldcrest, even smaller than a wren, pale of face with large dark eyes. Every now and then it would call with a thin rising and falling trill. We finally tore ourselves away, only to immediately catch sight of yet another beautiful bird. On a rock which was being lapped by water, a grey wagtail paused, dipping its tail continually before moving on to explore further rocks. We were really thrilled at this point and felt blessed to be out on such a day, in such a beautiful place, so rich in bird life. The grey wagtail, contrary to its name, had a good deal of yellow on its breast. In fact, it can easily be mistaken for the yellow wagtail. It is a graceful and slim bird with a very long tail. This one was in its preferred habitat of nearness to water, with rocks for perches and ledges for nesting. But trees nearby. We felt so lucky to be able to observe it in these quiet surroundings. We carried on along the path in a happy daze, with our arms around each other. Sometimes you have a feeling that you just have to savour the moment and store it, and it becomes a lovely memory. The air was damp and chill, but we were warm inside, despite our cold, damp faces and clothes. The old stone wall running along on the left of the path was absolutely green and furry, with well-established mosses of several types and shades. It was punctuated by an elderly wooden gate, which led to a wooded hill with a large house in the distance. There was a wooden sign on the gate that read, "Private property, trespassers will be prosecuted." I was pleased to note that the flock of long-tailed tits flew straight over the sign and into the private wood on the other side. Good for them, for whom such boundaries do not apply. There were a few walkers around, and a man by the shore had a small Jack Russell as his companion. On seeing us, the dog fixed us with a beady stare and ran straight for us, ignoring her master's calls of "Maggie, Maggie." As Paul had been bitten by a young sheepdog on his bike recently, we did feel a little uncertain, not helped by the maddening Jack Russell tendency of always running around the back of your heels, where you cannot see if they intend to sink their fangs into your ankle or not. It went on its way at last, and we heard another creature approaching. It was a swan in the water, making little snorts and hisses, and seeming to be intent on investigating us, no doubt for food. We walked on, and it lost interest, returning to dipping its neck and head into the water and scavenging on the lake bed with small lapping sounds. A swan is usually with its mate, and sure enough we soon saw its companion engaged in similar activity, Sitting by the shore, quite unobtrusively, was a fisherman with net and rods, completely unmoving and looking out to the lake. He was the only one of his kind there, and the only sound at that moment was the crunch of our boots as we strolled on in the windless, damp grey air. At intervals we came upon a simple wooden bench. Each one had a small metal plaque remembering someone loved and lost. The next one we came upon had a bunch of yellow flowers recently placed there. Next to them was a rain-dampened cigarette packet. It was deliberately placed open, with one cigarette protruding from it, as if being offered to the lady to whom the bench was dedicated as a special caring person. We came to the small rounded inlet beyond the wood, which is where we usually turn round to walk back. Here there were quite a number and variety of water birds sailing about on the lake. 2 or 3 Canada geese dwarfed the rest, and there were a couple of quarrelling coots. Their metallic cries echoed in the winter air across the water, and they rose up over the ripples, flapping their wings. There were several varieties of duck, including the eider duck, which has a cry, "Ooh," remarkably similar to that of Frankie Howard, an old-style comedian long gone. The wake of the pleasure boat caught up with them, and they bobbed up and down like feathered surfers on the waves. On the walk back to the car, Paul needed to relieve himself. There are no facilities around there, so I kept watch along the path. I made some ribald and intimate observations of the sort that married couples make on these occasions. When Paul turned round, he saw that we were only a dozen feet away from the unobtrusive fisherman, who we had again failed to notice. There on that lonely wintry path. This caused me to blush, as I felt he may have heard my jokey and rather ribald comments, and I hurried away, wreathed with acute embarrassment. We never saw his face, nor made eye contact, so we will never know how much he heard of our adolescent bantering. We staggered on, giggling, and then we kept hearing a kind of hammering sound, like a hammer on wood. We stopped and tried to pinpoint it. I thought it was someone doing some work at the far-off house up the hill. But we realised it was coming from high above us, and craned our necks up to the top of the pine trees until they ached. Finally we caught sight of 2 birds in the higher reaches of some very tall pine trees. They were hammering their beaks against the bark and then exploring anything they could loosen. We decided they must be either tree creepers or a pair of nuthatches. We could only see their black silhouettes against the sky. Suddenly one of them dropped down lower, and Paul saw the blue-grey back and orangey buff underparts of the nuthatch. It moved with little jumps, and then alarmingly came down the tree trunk head first. This sighting was the making of a special day. To see all these birds along this quite short stretch of shore was wonderful to behold. We had no binoculars with us and were blessed to be able to see all of these Windermere wild birds with the naked eye, quite close up. The afternoon light, already grey, was fading, and we made our way home in time for tea and a rest by a roaring fire. So that's the end of Wild Birds of Windermere. I hope you enjoyed being there with us and taking a walk with us and seeing all those beautiful birds. So blessings, I hope you're well and I hope you're doing okay. And I'll see you again soon.